Hello, everyone. I'm Alex, and welcome to another episode of our English Learning Podcast. Today, we're going to have some fun. Our topic is one that will probably make you laugh, maybe make you cringe a little, and definitely remind you that learning a language is a journey full of little surprises. The title of today's episode is Lost in Translation: Funny Mistakes English Learners Make. And let me tell you, as someone who has taught English and listened to learners from all over the world, I have heard some of the most hilarious language mix-ups you can imagine. Today, I'm going to share some real stories, a few listeners' submissions, and even some of my own embarrassing experiences in learning languages. We're going to laugh together and at the same time learn why these mistakes happen and how to avoid them. After all, the best way to learn is sometimes to laugh at yourself and keep moving forward. First, let's talk about why these funny mistakes even happen in the first place. You see, when we're learning a language, our brain tries to connect it to the language we already know. This is natural. It's called language transfer. So if you speak Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, or Bangla, and you start learning English, your brain wants to use the same rules from your first language. And this is where things get funny. For example, in some languages, using direct translation works fine, but in English, it can sound very strange or even very funny. I had a listener from Japan tell me once that when she first moved to the United States, she wanted to compliment her colleague by saying, "You are very skillful," but she accidentally said, "You are very clever." Now, clever isn't exactly bad, but in English, it can sometimes sound like you are saying the person is tricky or sneaky. Her colleague just raised an eyebrow and said, thanks? She didn't understand why until someone explained it later. That is the kind of lost in translation moment we're talking about today. Another reason these mistakes happen is because of false friends. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of friend who eats your snacks and never returns your calls. I'm talking about words that look the same in two languages but have different meanings. A listener named Carlos from Mexico once wrote to me about his embarrassing English mistake. He wanted to tell his American coworker that he was embarrassed about making a small mistake, but instead he said, "I am very pregnant." You see, in Spanish, the word embarazada means pregnant, not embarrassed. Everyone in the room stopped and looked at him, and he had no idea why. Later, he learned about the word embarrassed, and now he laughs about it. Imagine walking into the office and saying, "Sorry, I'm very pregnant," when you're actually just shy. Even I, as your host, have had my fair share of language blunders. I remember when I was trying to learn French during my college days. I wanted to say to my host family that I was full after a delicious dinner. In English, we say, "I am full," meaning we've had enough food. But in French, if you say, "Je suis plein," it doesn't just mean I'm full. It can actually be understood as "I am pregnant." So, yes, I told my host family that I was pregnant after eating a big dinner. They all stopped and stared at me with wide eyes, and the room went completely silent for a few seconds. Then, they all burst out laughing. It was mortifying at first, but it's a memory I'll never forget. And you know what? I never made that mistake again. One of the things I love about these mistakes is that they often lead to the best stories. I once asked my listeners to share their funniest English mistakes, and I received hundreds of emails. One of my favorites came from a student in South Korea. She was at a restaurant in New York City and wanted to ask the waiter if the chicken was organic. But instead of saying organic, she said orgasmic. So she literally asked the waiter, "Excuse me, is this chicken orgasmic?" The waiter froze, other diners turned their heads, and she had no idea what she said wrong until her friend whispered it to her. She told me that she wanted to disappear under the table, but now she says that mistake helped her remember the difference between the two words forever. Now, let's talk about why laughing at mistakes is so important in language learning. Many learners feel shy, afraid, or even ashamed when they make these little mistakes. But the truth is, mistakes are evidence that you are learning. Every time you make a silly mistake and someone corrects you, or even better, you notice it yourself, you are one step closer to mastering the language. I like to remind my listeners that no one has ever learned a language perfectly without making mistakes first. And when you can laugh at yourself, you turn those moments into happy memories instead of painful ones. Before we end this segment, let me share a small tip. When you make a mistake and someone laughs, don't take it personally. Instead, laugh with them and then repeat the correct version out loud. This will help your brain remember the correct form. And if you really want to remember it, write it down in a funny diary of mistakes. I know some learners who keep a funny English mistake journal, and whenever they look back at it, they not only laugh, but also see how much they've improved. So, in today's first segment, we've learned that making funny mistakes is a natural part of learning English. We've seen how false friends, direct translations, and similar sounding words can lead to hilarious results. And most importantly, we've learned that it's okay to laugh at yourself and keep going. In our next segment, I'll share even more unbelievable listener stories about English mistakes, some so funny that they could be in a comedy movie. Stay tuned, because you do not want to miss these gems.
We're diving straight into the second segment of our episode, Lost in Translation, Funny Mistakes English Learners Make. In our first segment, we talked about why language mix-ups happen and shared a few examples from both my experiences and some hilarious listener submissions. But now it's time for my favorite part, the listener stories. These are real-life English mistakes that our wonderful audience members have made while trying to communicate. And trust me, some of them are so good that they could be in a comedy sketch. The best thing is that all of these listeners learned something valuable from their experiences, and now they are happy to laugh about it. So let's jump in. Our first story comes from Maria, a listener from Brazil. Maria told me that she had just moved to Canada for her studies and was trying to make new friends. One day she was chatting with her classmates and wanted to tell them that she was feeling excited about the weekend trip they were planning. But instead of saying excited, she accidentally said, "I am very excited." Now, the pronunciation was off, and it sounded like she was saying, "I am very excited," which some of her classmates misheard as, "I am very erotic." Everyone suddenly stopped talking and looked at her with wide eyes. Maria didn't understand the problem until someone kindly whispered the misunderstanding to her. She turned bright red, but decided to laugh about it, and now she says she will never forget how to say excited correctly. The second story is from Hiroshi, a listener from Japan. He was on his first business trip to the United States and wanted to make a good impression at a dinner with his American colleagues. He had learned some polite English phrases and decided to use them. When the waiter brought his food, Hiroshi wanted to say, "I'm very satisfied," but what came out was, "I am very satisfied with you." The waiter raised an eyebrow, and his colleagues burst into laughter. Poor Hiroshi had no idea what he said wrong until someone explained that his sentence made it sound like he was romantically satisfied with the waiter. He told me that his face turned so red he could have matched the color of the ketchup bottle on the table. But he laughs now and says that since that day, he double-checks every compliment before saying it in English. Next up, we have a story from Olga, who is from Russia. Olga was very proud of her English and wanted to help a tourist in her city. She saw a man looking at a map and thought she could assist him. She walked up confidently and said, "Excuse me, can I help you with something?" The man smiled and said he was looking for a public restroom. Olga wanted to explain where the bathroom was, but she couldn't remember the word restroom. Instead, she said, "You can make your business behind the supermarket." The tourist froze, clearly unsure if he should follow her advice or call the police. Later, Olga learned the word restroom and now tells this story to every new English learner she meets, reminding them that sometimes direct translations can be dangerous. Another unforgettable story came from Ahmed, a listener from Egypt. He told me about the time he attended his first English class in London. The teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves and share something they loved. Ahmed wanted to say he loved cooking, but he accidentally said he loved cocks. The room went silent for a moment, and then some students started giggling. The teacher gently corrected him and explained the difference. Ahmed said he wanted to sink into the floor and disappear, but he will never forget that the word cooking has a long ooh sound. He told me that even now, years later, he practices cook, cook, cook every time he prepares a meal just to make sure he never repeats that mistake. Our next listener story is from Fatima in Morocco. She shared a moment that happened at a hotel in Paris when she was speaking English to a foreign guest. The guest wanted to check out early and asked Fatima if she could call him a taxi. Fatima smiled and said, "Yes, I will call you a taxi." The guest nodded politely, but after a moment he chuckled and said, "You mean call a taxi for me, not call me a taxi." You see, in English, if you say, "I'll call you a taxi," it can sound like you are giving the person the new name, taxi. The guest even joked, "Hello, Mr. Taxi." Fatima says she laughed so hard that she now tells every English learner to be careful with call someone something versus call for someone. Another gem came from Diego, a listener from Argentina. He was practicing English online and wanted to impress his American tutor by describing his dinner. He said confidently, "Tonight I will have a plate of children with vegetables." The tutor froze, then burst out laughing and gently explained that chicken and children are very different words. Diego laughed so hard and now always remembers to pronounce that K in chicken very clearly. Listening to these stories, you might notice a pattern. Most funny English mistakes come from mispronunciations, direct translations, or confusing words that sound similar. But these moments are actually golden opportunities for learning. Every single person who shared a story said that the embarrassment made the correct word stick in their memory forever. That's why I always tell learners, if you make a funny mistake, don't be shy. Laugh about it, learn from it, and keep speaking. In this segment, we've traveled the world through your stories, from Brazil to Japan, Russia to Morocco, and Argentina to Egypt. We've seen how one little word can change the meaning of a sentence completely, sometimes turning an innocent sentence into something hilarious or even scandalous. But here's the good news. All of these learners improved their English because of these moments. And now, by sharing their stories, they're helping all of us avoid the same mistakes. As we wrap up segment 2, I want you to think about your own funniest English mistake. Maybe it happened in a classroom, a restaurant, or at work. If you can laugh about it now, that means you've grown as a language learner. And if you're still embarrassed, just remember that these stories show we've all been there, and we survived. In the next segment, segment 3, I'm going to talk about the lessons behind these mistakes, why these errors happen, how to prevent them, and how to turn them into powerful learning tools. Plus, I'll share some expert tips on avoiding the most common lost in translation moments. Stay tuned because segment 3 is where we turn laughter into learning.
We've already laughed a lot in the first 2 segments. First, we explored why these hilarious mix-ups happen, and then we heard some of the funniest listener stories from around the world, like the student who asked if chicken was orgasmic, the tourist who was told to do his business behind a supermarket, and the poor learner who said he loved cocks instead of cooking. These stories are entertaining, but they're also valuable learning opportunities. That's what this third segment is all about, turning your funny mistakes into powerful lessons, understanding why they happen, and learning how to avoid repeating them. Let's start with the main reasons language learners make these mistakes. There are usually 3 big culprits: direct translation, false friends, and pronunciation pitfalls. The first one, direct translation, is when your brain tries to take a sentence from your native language and convert it word for word into English. This is natural because when we're learning, our brain uses our first language as a base to create meaning. But languages don't always follow the same rules. For example, in Spanish, saying "I am embarrassed" can lead you to say "I am pregnant" if you translate embarazada directly. Or in French, saying "I am full" can become "I am pregnant" if you translate "je suis plein"
the wrong way. This happens because expressions rarely match perfectly across languages. Direct translation is like trying to wear shoes on the wrong feet. They fit, but something feels very off. The second culprit is false friends, which are words that look similar between languages, but have different meanings. These can cause some of the funniest misunderstandings. I once had a student from Germany who wanted to say he was sensible in English, meaning logical and thoughtful. But in German, sensibel means sensitive or emotional. So when he said, "I am very sensible," people thought he was bragging about being practical, but he was actually trying to say he was easily hurt by criticism. False friends can be sneaky because they trick your brain into thinking you already know the word. One way to overcome this is to make a small list of the most dangerous false friends between your language and English and review it regularly. The third culprit is pronunciation pitfalls, which we saw a lot in our listener stories. Mispronouncing just one letter can completely change the meaning of a word. Beach can become bitch. Sheet can become something very inappropriate. And chicken can turn into children. Many learners feel shy about practicing pronunciation, but it is absolutely key to being understood and avoiding embarrassment. A good tip is to record yourself speaking and compare your pronunciation to native speakers. Apps, podcasts, or even talking to a mirror can help you spot the differences. Repetition is your best friend here. Now that we know why these mistakes happen, let's talk about how to prevent them without killing the fun. Step 1 is embracing mistakes. It might sound funny, but if you try to be perfect from day one, you'll probably speak less and learn slower. I've seen so many learners stay silent because they are afraid of saying something wrong. But silence doesn't teach you anything. Speaking, even with mistakes, gives your brain the practice it needs to grow. And if a mistake makes people laugh, congratulations! You just gave someone a happy memory, and you'll probably never forget that word again. Step 2 is learning in context instead of translation. When you learn a new word, don't just memorize it by itself. Memorizing embarrassed as ashamed in your language isn't enough. Instead, learn it in a short sentence. I was embarrassed when I spilled coffee on my shirt. This helps your brain understand how the word naturally lives in English sentences, so you won't accidentally replace it with a false friend. Step 3 is paying attention to cultural meaning, not just dictionary meaning. Some mistakes are funny because they are technically correct, but they break cultural rules. For example, in many Asian languages, calling someone fat might be a casual observation, but in English, it can be seen as very rude. Similarly, saying, "I want to go to toilet" is understandable, but in polite English, we often say, "I need to use the restroom" or "bathroom." Learning these cultural nuances prevents you from making mistakes that might confuse or offend people. Step 4 is using humor as a learning tool. When something funny happens, write it down. I love the idea of keeping a funny English mistakes journal. Every time you or a friend makes a hilarious mistake, record it. For example, write, "July 15, said I love cocks instead of I love cooking. Learned the long ooh sound." This not only helps you remember the correction, but also makes studying more enjoyable. Learning a language should never feel like punishment. It should be an adventure filled with memorable moments. Step 5 is slow down and listen to yourself. Many mistakes happen because we rush to speak and don't give our brain time to process. If you slow down, you can catch yourself before you call someone Mr. Taxi or invite someone to your orgasmic dinner. Pausing for just 1 second can save you a lifetime of embarrassment. Finally, step 6 is get feedback from real people. Apps and textbooks are great, but nothing beats having someone laugh kindly and say, "Actually, in English, we say it this way." Whether it's a teacher, a language partner, or a friendly native speaker, feedback is the bridge between mistakes and mastery. In short, Segment 3 is all about transforming funny mistakes into learning opportunities. Mistakes happen because of direct translation, false friends, and pronunciation problems, but they can be prevented with context learning, cultural awareness, humor, and feedback. And the best part? Every time you survive a funny mistake, your confidence grows. It's like a badge of honor in your language journey. In our final segment, Segment 4, we're going to wrap up this episode with some listener challenges and a positive message. I'll invite you to share your own funniest mistakes, and we'll talk about how laughing at yourself can be the secret weapon to becoming fluent in English faster. Stick around for the ending. It's going to leave you smiling and motivated to keep speaking English without fear.
We've been on quite the journey together. In our first segment, we explored why language mistakes are both hilarious and natural. In the second segment, we delve into listener-submitted stories that had us laughing out loud, from orgasmic chicken to plates of children. And in the third segment, we turned our laughter into lessons, learning why these mistakes happen and how to use humor as a tool to improve. Now, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with motivation, a listener challenge, and a reminder that laughter is your best friend on your language learning journey. First, let's take a moment to reflect. Think about all the stories we've heard today. They're funny now, but at the time, every learner probably felt a mix of embarrassment, panic, or even shame. And yet, what happened? Over time, those moments turned into the best learning experiences. That's the magic of mistakes. They don't define us, they refine us. I want you to imagine your language learning journey like a movie. Every mistake you make is like a comedy scene that your future self will watch and laugh at. You're the hero of that movie, and the bloopers, the funny mistakes, are proof that you're growing. Now, I know that some of you might still feel shy or afraid of making mistakes. Maybe you stayed quiet in class, avoided talking to native speakers, or even hesitated to order food in English because you're worried about saying something wrong. But here's the truth. Fluency is built on thousands of tiny mistakes. Every fluent speaker you admire has been in your shoes. They've mispronounced words, mixed up meanings, and made someone laugh unintentionally. The difference is that they kept speaking anyway. They didn't let the fear of mistakes steal their progress. One of my favorite things to remind learners is this: laughter is the best teacher. If you can laugh at your mistakes, they will stop feeling like failures and start feeling like fun stories. When you laugh, your brain relaxes, and you're more likely to remember the correction. Think back to the stories we heard today. Do you think Ahmed will ever forget the difference between cooking and cocks? No way! Do you think Diego will ever forget to pronounce the K in chicken? Never! Humor doesn't just make life better, it makes memory stronger. Now, I want to turn this reflection into action. Here's my listener challenge for you. Think of your funniest English mistake. Maybe it was a word you mispronounced, a sentence that came out wrong, or a misunderstanding with a friend. Write it down in your funny mistake journal. If you don't have one, start one today. This is a great way to track your growth. Share it with someone, a friend, a classmate, or even send it to our podcast. If you email us your story, maybe we'll feature it in a future episode. Sharing your story turns your private embarrassment into public laughter, and suddenly it becomes a positive memory. To help you even more, here's a small practice exercise you can do this week. Choose 3 new English words or phrases you've learned recently. Make a short, funny story using those words, even if it's silly or unrealistic. For example, yesterday I went to the supermarket, bought a chicken, and apologized to it because I thought it was embarrassed. This kind of playful practice helps your brain remember vocabulary and teaches you how to have fun with the language. Learning doesn't have to be serious all the time. Fun makes it faster. As we come to the end of this episode, I want to leave you with a clear message. Your mistakes are not your enemy. They are your teachers in disguise. Every time you mispronounce a word, mix up a meaning, or create an awkward moment, you're taking another step toward fluency. The only real mistake is staying silent.
Language learning is like dancing. You will step on some toes, but eventually you'll move with confidence. Before we say goodbye, let's do a quick recap of today's key takeaways. Mistakes are natural and often hilarious. Most errors come from direct translation, false friends, or pronunciation issues. Laughter transforms mistakes into unforgettable lessons. Keeping a funny mistakes journal and sharing your stories can supercharge your learning. The secret to fluency is speaking often, laughing often, and never letting fear stop you. So, my dear listeners, the next time you make a funny English mistake, I hope you smile instead of frown. Imagine me, Alex, cheering for you and saying, "Yes, that's another step toward fluency." Because every giggle, every facepalm moment, and every story that makes someone laugh is a sign that you are alive in your learning journey. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode of our podcast. If you enjoyed today's topic and learned something, don't forget to share this episode with a fellow English learner who might need a good laugh. And remember, I'd love to hear your funniest English mistake. Send it in, and who knows, your story might make someone else's day in our next episode. Until next time, keep speaking, keep laughing, and keep learning. Because as we've seen today, the path to fluency is paved with funny moments. And if you can laugh your way through English, you'll never truly be lost in translation.